Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Be the Vessel podcast. My name is Daniel, and I play the roles of channeler and intuitive psychologist, aiming to bridge all aspects of the healing arts while navigating my return journey to the stars. I interview those journeying through all aspects of healing, whether that be from more traditional Western frames or from a more spiritual or spirit-based connection. What I always find is that everyone is a bridge between worlds, a universe unto themselves, and a unique light that shines brightly for the collective. If you like what you hear and are interested in more of my offerings, consider joining the Be the Vessel community at patreon.com/Dr. Daniel Atkins, where you will find various unique offerings, bonus content, and podcasts such as my own channeled information and the new Be the Vessel healing series. May you find what you're looking for and remember the light within. And lastly, the views in this episode do not represent my personal views, nor are they to be taken as medical advice or scientific fact. Always do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and trust your own guidance. Felicia Bender calls herself the Practical Numerologist and uses numerology to validate and define her pathway and purpose in life in an empowered way that's fun, inspiring, and actionable. She's the author of several books and is the resident numerologist for astrostyle.com. Felicia is a go-to numerology expert featured in many media outlets, including Refinery 29, Women's Health, and more. You can discover more about Felicia and her offerings at feliciabender.com, where she generously provides various numerological forecasts for your personal life path and for the collective. I discovered Felicia online while searching for someone to guide me deeper into this fascinating spiritual framework, and Felicia very much satisfied that craving. She wanted to use my personal numerology as a backdrop to go deeper, and so we did just that. Please enjoy this episode with Felicia Bender, and may it be an invitation, a gift, and a medicine to guide you deeper into your own numerological soul mapping and mission in this life and beyond. Hi, Felicia. Thanks so much for being here, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. Numerology has been one of these frameworks, spiritual frameworks or modalities that I've known about for a while. And I can't even remember the first time I learned about my personal life path number. Oh, but I think it was probably more through Dan Millman's work. I think I was introduced to his work. And it was, it never took um, the primary slot of sort of the spiritual language I was investigating, but it was always there. And I just started getting more and more interested in sort of the current life path year and the months and the days. And like I know that today is a 9-day. So it's just always something that's sort of calculating in the background. So I'm excited to dig in with you. So I think the best place for us to start would be just to hear a little bit about your origin story with numerology. Like when were you drawn to it, and when did you feel that it was part of your calling more than some of the other frameworks and modalities that you may have been exposed to?
Well, it's interesting because the cosmic joke for me is that I absolutely, positively despise mathematics. Math has honestly been my most anxiety-producing subject in school. I can remember my mother sitting on the bed with me with the flashcards and doing that until I would weep.
Mm,
I really, math was never something that really fit well with me, and I could never understand it. So it is really funny
yeah, cosmic joke
that
indeed.
it is a cosmic joke indeed that I do numerology. I also say to people who also have an adverse reaction to math and to numbers that if I can do it, anyone can. So
Mm,
don't run screaming from the room quite yet, because what I have found is that that numerology basically is not math; it's a language,
mm,
and which brings me back to, I mean, you're talking about an origin story, and I think we all who consider ourselves to be seekers or to be attempting to evolve ourselves as we live this life. And that started for me consciously in my early 30s. And it was when I got a call that my mother was diagnosed with inoperable a brain tumor. And she passed away at what I consider a young age at 59. And she had,
Her
we were
second
having,
Saturn return.
exactly, exactly. And so we could dissect that
Yeah.
as much as, we could go all over with that. And yet for me, I got married fairly young. I had two children at that time, and I was getting a PhD, and my entire life just was coming out from under me. I just, and it's one of the things that you do this podcast for, and everything else
Yeah.
is because everyone who seeks this doesn't do so because they're feeling all bright and shiny and great.
Exactly. It's not because everything's going amazing.
When everything's going great, you don't care about this
No,
stuff,
it doesn't
right? You
matter.
don't. It doesn't matter. And yet, when you are down in it, when you are in what the cliche is the dark night of the soul, right? And there's not necessarily just one of those that people go through in their lifetime. And so that was really um, not the first one for me, but it was the most significant one. And it really, really um, it just turned my world upside down. And I began to seek out other kinds of therapies. It was at a point in my life where I wasn't sleeping because of the anxiety and everything that I was experiencing. And I would literally, at that time in my life, go downstairs in the middle of the night, which is what I never do. I'm a good sleeper, and I would go down and I would begin to do yoga poses without even knowing yoga. I mean, I had no idea I was doing it was all I could do to just, my body was speaking to me
Just the
about how to
intuition.
relieve
Yeah.
itself. Yeah. And it really happened when I went in, someone said I should go get a massage. And I was like, I can't do, self-care. What is
Yeah.
that?
What's that mean? Yeah.
What's that all about? And so, short story is, I went in, she did a massage, and I came out, and she asked me when I wanted to reschedule. And that was one of those things. I mean, honestly, Daniel, I was like, I think, aren't you supposed to just have one of these? It's like one and done, right?
This is a luxury. This is just a
This is a
one-time
luxury. You're
thing.
not supposed to do this as a constant. So anyway, it was that beginning level of just tapping into myself in a different way. And she actually did massage and also something called Touch for Health energy balancing. And she asked me the next time, she said, I think this might, benefit you at this time. And I was I didn't know how to understand that. And we went into her room, and it has one of those posters. I don't know if you've ever seen those, that says, how do you feel today? And it has
Mm-hmm.
all those, remember those old
Yep.
ones?
Different
They're
emotion words and things like
way
that.
back in the day, sad, except, and I looked on there, and I couldn't find the word fine, because that was whenever I answered
Yeah.
that, I'm
Where's the word
fine.
that avoids all the other words?
What's the word of avoidance that you are hanging on to today? And it would be fine. And so I couldn't find fine. And it again set me off into this world of tapping into my experience, my emotions, all of that went with that. But she did Touch for Health energy balancing with me that day. And I literally got up from that table and I walked differently. It was just an entire recalibration and I was like, whoa, there's something going on, So I began learning everything that I could about energy, about
Yeah.
intuition, about herbs, about healing. I mean, all of it. I was just insatiable I trained to be a pranic in pranic healing.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you about
And
that because I trained in pranic healing too, and I love it.
okay, so there you go. We got, little pinky thing going through, like,
Yeah,
hey, high five.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and anyway, and in the meantime, I'm attempting to live a life of being a mom and being in the world and all that went with that. And so flash forward through a divorce, through a move, through getting into a different profession. I was in real estate for a while and that sort of thing. But my youngest daughter was in college and to get back around to numerology. And I was walking through a bookstore because she was really at an impasse about what she wanted to major in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a book that was about, your dream job or your, this sort of thing. And it kind of jumped out at me. It was one of those kind of Stephen King moments, where you're like, oh, that's kind of a little odd. And I bought the book and I read it. Of course, don't tell her I did. Of course, I'll tell her, but I read it before I gave it to her. And it had some numerology in it.
Okay.
So it didn't
What what
have,
was
it
what
wasn't
was the book?
it was called I See Your Dream Job by Sue Frederick. And she ended up becoming a very dear friend and colleague,
Oh.
actually. And she's an intuitive and she uses some numerology in her practice as well. And so it was just a little bit about the life path and about the personal year. And I don't know why, it was just one of those things where I did myself. I, calculated my kids and my, all of those things. And it just clicked. You know how that feels. It's just because in all of what I've been doing, I'm very highly intuitive, all the things that go with that. And yet I'm also a little bit skeptical,
Mm-hmm.
a little pragmatic,
Mm-hmm.
and so I kind of wanted a reference point in that way. And numerology provides that for me. It's like the third party. You can always reach for it in the book on the bookshelf, when you don't have to go to, and sit in a cave and meditate for
It doesn't
forever. I
have to
mean,
get too deep. Like, was it, I'm curious, like, what was it about numerology? Was it just that it was numbers? Like, what provided that sense of safety to your logical mind?
what I loved about it is that you don't, it's kind of like strength finders for the soul. And you don't have to answer any questions. You just have to provide your full name as it appears on your birth certificate and your date of birth. And it tells you everything. And
Yeah.
if you simply, it's like astrology, it's like all kinds of other modalities. It's just people get so frustrated with what God, the universe, whatever it is. It's like, so why doesn't someone tell me what to do? Why don't I have an instruction manual? It's like, well, we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just have to, it's kind of one of those things that people will ask me, what is numerology, right? I mean, how does this even work? And first of all, I really can't tell you how it works. A little
Yeah.
spoiler alert. I
Yeah.
I can't tell you how it works, but I can tell you that I'm fascinated with this tool and it works every time. And the numbers never lie.
Maybe that's part of why it goes down easier, like because you don't have to answer any of the big questions. It's just a tool, and if it's functional for you, you can go with that. You can go with that.
I agree, and yet, as I've really delved into this pretty deeply, what I have found is I have a lot of clients who will say, wow, I mean, I've kind of enjoyed astrology. And this is not to disrespect astrology at all. I love astrology and I get my astrology done. But they're like,
Mhm.
certain people will find that numerology has even more depth.
Interesting.
And so if, what I would say is that I think it doesn't offer you just a cursory idea of who you are. Honestly, I think it's pretty down and dirty. I think it's pretty deep. And I think we can, when we dissect our numbers, what I love is that we can really, really hone into our superpowers and what we're here to do, right? And then we're going to understand what's blocking that,
Yeah.
because there's always going, and so to me it is a gift that is beyond measure to be able to know this is going to be a consistent challenge and a consistent issue for me all of my life, because
Hmm.
it's not a one and done, let's get it done, let's figure it out, let's be done with this. And I think that's where it's just mental gymnastics, but it's also, it's like a lot of people feel like they attempt to get to a destination,
Yeah.
right? And be finished with something. And that's not how this operates in our lives. It's like this is a lifetime for a
Well, it's
reason.
and it sounds like, getting deep, getting into the depths of numerology, which maybe we'll do today, can provide some sense of what you can accept about yourself, about this incarnation, the areas you can grow in, and everything in between.
Absolutely. And what I find is that it's always giving us information about what we're again what we're working with. We're always dealing with the opposing forces, right, of
Yeah.
what we're here to do. And a beautiful thing that it provides as well is really some insight into um, meaning around the trauma you've had, the
Mm.
experiences, where you showed up, your family, the all of the things that we can use as our story
Mm-hmm.
of victimization or of poor me or of I never got or whatever. And numerology can really frame it's like, okay, but and yet this is why this was happening.
So let me ask you, Felicia, because I like to, in that question of why, I like to, one of the stories I like to explore is the story of the soul, and the story of pre-life selection and things like that. So would you in some ways merge the numerology with what this idea of the soul selected for you to come and experience? That
Oh,
kind of idea?
100%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
100%. I feel like this is the contract that we made, and we
Yeah.
can.
Right.
I even look at the core numbers, like the day you were born to me, and this is my interpretation because
Sure.
just as the disclaimer is numerology is a science and it is an art.
Yeah. Like most
Right?
things, it's
And
both.
yes, and so it's there are many ways to interpret. I'm a numerologist who also likes to acknowledge different schools of thought
Sure.
that might come into play, and yet also say this is what I have found works for me, or whatever you want to say with that. But I would say, to focus on your question, it's the birthday number, for instance, the day you were born, to me indicates kind of, if we want to go to the soul route, and kind of strip it down, I feel like it is your soul's it's like the past lifetime you experienced, and it's like your most recent memory,
Mm,
right? It's what you kind of, I don't want to say default into, but what you feel the most comfortable um in
okay.
this lifetime. So it's the day of your birth. And yet you're being asked to bridge that into the life path number, which is a different number. Usually, some people have the same number. So
Yeah, I was just gonna say because I feel like mine the same?
no, your birthday is a number one because you're born on the
Oh, okay,
20.
right,
Yeah,
right.
it's because you're
And
born
then
on the 28th.
okay.
Yes. And
And then 8 is my life path.
as your life path, but they're similar vibes. We can talk
Okay.
about that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
And yet they're in numerology. I would consider them to be the two most hard driving business oriented
Which is
uh,
funny because
pathways.
that is not, I would say it's not something that's my forte, but I'm
Well, and
learning.
that is a perfect example. I work with so many eights. They're like, no, no, no. And I'm like, well, I hate to break it to you, but eights, we all have money issues, right? We all have ideas around money, but an eight will have even heightened levels of what I consider to be a love-hate relationship
Yeah,
with money.
that resonates.
Yeah. So, and yet in terms of the soul contract, I feel like this does lay out what we contracted in to do. I love, actually, I have many times done group work with families.
Mm,
And I mean, I don't know about you, Daniel, but I am so admiring of a family who will actually come together and work with me, the numerologist on Zoom
Yeah.
for a group.
Yeah.
I mean, my family wouldn't, I'm a numerologist and they wouldn't let me do that. I mean, they would be, no, thanks. I
Parts
don't
of
want
my
to hear.
family would, others would be like eye roll, but yeah,
Yeah, right,
mixed bag.
exactly. And yet it's kind of anyway, all I'm saying is I love looking at families because you can come there, families come in with
There's like would
these.
you say there's like this sort of family constellation of with the numbers?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Mm.
And there's usually one, there could be more than one, but at least one where I remember doing a group, the whole family, and I was like, well, and all of you have all these, are these master numbers. They were all master number 11 somewhere in their chart, which was a big deal. And then I said, and then there's who is John? Where is he? And he was sitting in the back. And he kind of sheepishly put his hand up, and I'm like, "You're the black sheep, right, John? You?" And he's like, "Oh my God, yes, yeah."
Wow, I love
And so
that.
you can, and I don't know anybody. All I'm looking at is
Right.
numbers on a page, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, wow. That is incredible. I didn't even really consider extending it to sort of the family dynamics, and it's amazing once you get into the depths of a framework and a tool how and someone who, has really um made it their primary language, um how extensive it can be. What do you happen to know the how far back numerology goes? Is like does it go as far back as astrology? Is it one of those ancient tools?
Yes, absolutely. And the type of numerology that I practice comes from Pythagoras. So I don't know if you were paying attention in math
I
class.
wasn't paying attention in math class, but recently I've heard that Pythagoras was like a pretty spiritual guy. So now I'm interested.
Yeah, he was something else, that guy. I mean, he was a mathematician, he was a mystic. He would have been kind of a fascinating guy to sit down and have lunch with. And he Greek, island of Samos. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly for all you Greeks. Samos, I'm not sure. And yet, in the 500s, so BC. So and this practice comes from him, but there are different forms of numerology as well. There's Chaldean, there's Vedic, there's Chinese, there's all kinds of different, just like
Yeah, just
astrology.
like astrology, like Vedic in the Western frame kind of thing.
Yep, exactly, exactly. And yet it comes from, again, what I practice here comes from Pythagoras. And very basically, he just posits that idea that numbers carry with them not only a quantitative value, we can count with them, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And yet each number, 1 through 9, carries with it a vibration and
Mm.
a frequency. So he was very much into music, tonality, harmony, because a lot of numerology has to do with how things sound. Because we're looking at your name and we're looking at your birth date, and we convert each letter into a number.
That's one of the things that I love is just hearing that as far back as you go, people were talking about things like vibration and frequency and sound and the energetics because it's something that has meant a lot to me. Like you said, when you had a massage and you felt things were different. It's something that I've experienced through various energetic modalities and tools. And I love the merging of things. I love how you can explore frames like astrology and numerology and somehow connect the dots to an energetic or a vibration because it just seems to make sense to me, even though I don't have all the answers. I love the merging and the connecting of dots where, oh, maybe there's something all connected here.
Nothing is separate. I mean, all of these modalities, we're all doing the same thing. We're just doing it differently, right? So we're all attempting to merge into one lane, and yet we're all just in different lanes doing whatever connects with us personally. Um,
So it's so interesting, yeah. So it's almost like it started out as differentiating sort of the quote unquote meaning of these numbers as different resonances and or octaves or something like that. And then at some point we started building some additional meaning and interpretation into into
Well, the way
these?
that I see it, or I attempt to explain it from my vantage point, is that it actually isn't just an agreed upon thing. It's actual code.
Mm,
It's actual data. And in some ways, I think we can kind of willingly suspend our disbelief a little bit more so these days, as we would say, because we're in a technological world. I mean, what is the cloud, right?
yeah.
Where is it? How does that operate? I mean, it's digits and data. It's all floating around somewhere,
It's the
right? It's
Matrix, yeah.
somewhere. It is. And you look, even if we think of numbers, you've got a cell phone, you put a number in there and it goes to a specific device, right? So we can look at it in that way. And I also like to extend it. This is the way that resonates mostly with me, is it's kind of like Morse code, let's say. So you walk into a room and you don't know Morse code, and Morse code is going off to dee 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 dee, and you just think it's an annoyance, or you don't even hear it, right? And that's an interesting thing. I would think you would hop onto that idea, because we've got all this information going on all the time, right, Daniel? And many people just
It
don't
depends what
notice
we
it.
tune into, where we
Yeah, they're
tune the
just
radio
not tuned
dial.
in. Like,
Yeah.
they're seeing it all the time, but they don't know that they're seeing it, right?
Yeah.
So, but to extend that metaphor, so that person kind of just walks out of the room and they walk out of the room. Another person walks in, they know Morse code, and they're like, "Oh man, get me a piece of paper.
Let me
There's an
translate this.
emergency going on here.
Yeah.
Let me translate this." And so that is the way I see it. It's like it's the information is there and it is coded and it is always operational, whether we know it or not, or whether we believe in it or not. It's always there.
I like that idea that it's like, it's sort of, if not the language, it's a language of the universe that provides a backdrop that we can tune into if we want, if we're at that, if we want to match that frequency, that vibration. It's not so different from what I would talk about in terms of tapping into higher dimensional frequencies or light or densities of light. Like, in some ways they provide different perspective, they provide different energetic, some might say they provide, a different experience of reality, but it's sort of based on what you're able to or willing to or karmically aligned to tap into.
Exactly. And then when you get this, this little roadmap, blueprint, whatever you want to call it, it's pretty awesome because you can see what you checked in for and what those challenges will be. And it can provide you a really great framework around cycles of time that we go through. It's like you were referencing the personal year. And I call the personal year, it's kind of like it is an energetic presence that is there. We feel it on different levels depending on our, sensitivity and how much we're paying attention. And yet when you know what I call it knowing the theme to your party. It's
Yeah.
much more, but it is an energy that is supporting us during each year. And if we know what that is, we can tap into it and we can use it, right? We can use that energy to its fullest expression. And we can also understand the caveats. We can understand what's not being, what the challenge points to that, and try to detour around those or understand those in a way. So it's using it rather than it using us, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, it's what I'm saying. It's
letting
one of
it
those
letting
things.
uh allowing it to empower you,
Exactly.
rather than giving your power away to something, allowing the
Rather
tool
than
to
beating
empower
you
you.
up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things, like, for instance, in the personal year spectrum, if you are experiencing a number 7 personal year, if you think that that is a year where you are going to hammer it in the financial world, that your
Yeah, no.
career is going to
No.
be taken off and riding high, and that is your goal, you will be miserable and you will fail and you will be sorely disappointed. You got to wait till the year afterwards to really tap into that. So that's what I'm talking about. It's like if you know that, because the feedback you're getting from the universe is like, sorry, but this isn't the right time. But you're going to see it as as an insult.
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
the universe is inviting you to see there's something else here for you. There's something more aligned.
there's
And it's
something you
probably,
need to do first.
yeah, it's probably going to align with the energetic you feel in your body. That's just not, the natural intelligence or wisdom of the body that may be naturally guiding you more to retreat or tune in or listen in or wherever it guides you. That may just so happen to align with these universal principles of numerology, so you can ride the wave and not feel so caught in resistance or so disappointed about what may not be manifesting, and rather turn your attention to what it may be offering, to the invitation.
Exactly. So it's just one of those things that if it resonates with you and the key elements of your personal year, you can really it just make it much more successful and make it much richer and just make you much happier. And then the things that are the bumpy parts, you can make sense out of. I
Yeah.
think that's also very, very important for all of us to go, okay, it's not just me being an idiot. It's not just the universe hates me. It's not that I'm failing. It's not necessarily this. It's that these occurrences happen to teach me this, to take me over here, to open this up, those sorts of things. So it can really allow us some really beautiful openings rather than feelings of defeat.
Yeah. So let's make this a little more real for people, and we can use myself as an example, which I often do. Although I'll give you a choice whether it would feel aligned to start to explore sort of like the collective year we're in now, or to go deeper into to my personal numerology, where it feels good to sort of dive into to start to paint a picture of how this looks.
I love doing the individual stuff because to me, very honestly, it all starts there.
Okay, let's do it.
Right? I mean, it really does because each of us, we are in a collective, but I don't know if you feel this way, but we're here to work our pathway and heal ourself.
That's all we can do.
And that's really all we can do. And then
Yeah,
it emanates out. And, we could, of course, talk about the universal energy. And yet, if I had a choice and I just made it,
you
that I'd
did.
love to talk more personally, because I think that's where we get the most benefit. And so if we were to just start out, I would say that knowing the life path number is the most, if you're only going to know one thing about
Yeah,
numerology, it would be that. So it's like knowing your sun sign in astrology is what I would say is similar
yeah,
to that. And it's a very simple process. Of course, I referenced before that I'm someone who will talk about different schools of thought. So there are different ways to do the math. There are different and and I'll reference what difference it makes as we go. But what I
sure.
will do is give you an example of how I find is the most proper way, if you want to put it that way. And so we take the entire year, the month, day, and year of birth. So you're born on August 28th, 1988. So we take August, and that's the eighth month. So that's a number eight. And all of this, for those of you who are like, does that matter? Yes, every number that shows up matters.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I have a lot of eights in my birthday,
you
just so.
do. You are, lots of eights, lots of ones, all of this. And also nine is a really significant number for you in your chart. And it doesn't have anything to do with your core numbers, but it has to do with your cycles of time. And I can reference that in a moment.
Okay,
But
cool.
so to stick with that life path number, so August is an eight. You're born on the 28th. Now, in numerology, we're always reducing optimally to a one-digit number. So we're going to add two. So 28 is 2 plus 8. That equals 10. Don't let that confuse you out there because
Right. It's only one
we
through nine, the
it's
digits.
only 1 through 9. So we continue, but that can be confusing. It's like if you get a 10, a 20, a 30, you continue to reduce. And so that is 2 plus 8 is 10. 1 plus 0 is 1. So have a 1 birthday. 1988, this is going to be the hardest math we're going to do, people.
Yep.
Okay. Hardest math right here. We're going to add this together. 1 plus 9 plus 8 plus 8. So that's 19 is 10 plus 8 is 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. 2 plus 6, that equals 8. So then we take 8 plus 1 plus 8. 8 and 8 is 16, 17. So 1 plus 7 is 8. So that's an 8 life path. So the 1 and the 7 does, when you get more detailed and you get more deeply into it, it also gives you the resonance of the 8. But so yours is more leadership and spirituality than like, and yet you have a 20, and yet if it were a 26, it would be more home, family, relationship, that sort of thing. But the powerhouse 8. So does that make sense? It just has a different
Yeah,
flavor
it's like
that comes with it.
it's getting the sort of the sub energies that
Yep,
make up the
exactly.
collective energy of the 8.
That's a great way of looking at it. It's a sub energy there.
Because I've heard like through Dan Millman's way, it's been 44/8, so then it's like that's probably a different
Exactly. So
thing.
that's what I was going to reference as well. So if you then do it, if you take the second route, which is a Dan Millman's route, and also just sidebar, I don't know if you know, but Dan Millman himself is an 8 life
Oh,
path.
really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
So there
Interesting.
you go. You resonate with Dan for a reason.
All right, we got the same name too.
And he's amazing. I absolutely adore his work. It's phenomenal. If anyone is out there and wants to
Yeah.
read
Hmm.
Dan Millman's book, The Life You Were Born to Live, it's amazing. And so with that said, that we would do it the long way. I know this is a technical term, but we're doing it the long way. So it would be 8 plus 2 plus 8 plus 1 plus 9 plus 8 plus 8. And I'll trust you that that's 44. I'm not going to do that
Yeah,
right here.
yeah,
And
yeah.
44 is a master number. Okay. So 44 would be a master number, which brings us to master numbers. That's often what brings people to numerology, is that they discover they have master
I
numbers in their
see.
chart.
And
And
that entices them. They're like, "Oh, that sounds
it's very
interesting,
enticing. They're
master.
like,
Okay.
ooh, I'm super special.
Yeah, I'm a master.
Yay.
Tell me more. I like this."
Yeah, exactly the way it is. And the master numbers do end, and I'll say what they are first, so those listening can understand. Well, what is a master number? It is the repeated, it's the repeating numbers. So it would be the double 1, so the 11, double 2, 22, double 3, 33, and in Daniel's case, a 44,
Right. There's
and
some
onward.
debate, right? Some don't consider 44 to be master, but
I think they're all master numbers, and yet I feel like these numbers are not coming into play in core numbers because mathematically be until
right.
now. So that's my take on it. And the 44 is the double 4 plus the 8. So have fun with that, Daniel.
Intense to say the least.
Yeah, it's got its thing. So anyway, so you can do it. You can do it the way that I did the example for the month, day, year reducing first. Then you can do it the long way. And I would say if you do get a number 2, a number 4, or a number 6, I would always encourage you to do it also the long way, because you can just game it and see if a master number shows up there.
Yeah, just
Usually
it's
for a
like some
number
additional
2.
information to
For a
yeah.
number 2, it will come up.
Yeah.
There's rarely a number 2 life path that isn't also a master number,
Oh, interesting.
because it can be a 20, but then if you do it the long way, it'll be 29 or 38,
My
usually.
mother has gone through every format so she could get to 22. So she could be master 22.
Tell your mother to be careful what she wishes for, okay? So yes, and that's what I would also say, is that everyone gets kind of cha-cha-cha about the master numbers, right?
But it
And
probably
yet
comes with,
just
some responsibility.
it does. So it basically, in my mind, indicates that you have come in with master. If you have a master number anywhere in your chart, in your core numbers, it means you have more heightened potentials, spiritual potential in your life, no matter how you might personally define that. Simply spiritual to me simply means more highly evolved, right?
From
However,
this
again,
soul perspective, if you
from a
will.
soul's perspective, it also is asking you to step up into leadership roles, even if you don't want to. And it's also really asking you to level the ego and to have humility, be humble, have those sorts of spiritual attributes, because these are powerful energies and powerful presences. And it's also going to give master number people always have more intense obstacles in their lives. You can say life itself is experiential, and yet the master numbers are really thrown into the experience pool pretty intensely. For instance, I know a lot of 11s who have had near-death experiences, who have had major accidents that have, brought them into their spiritual, gifts and their
Yeah.
healing and that sort of thing. Now, what I also want to say is, please, those listening out there, don't fear and have trepidation about that. There are many people with master numbers that can live a fairly normal life in that way. And yet often it does bring in some real doozies.
Some
And
initiation, if you
some
will.
initiation. That's a great way of putting it. And at the end of the day, what I find is that master numbers really don't ripen and richen and mature until a bit later in life,
Yeah,
because
which is how
it's
I've felt personally.
there you go. And master number people are usually like, what time is it? I think I'm really old and I'm only
Yeah.
18, so it comes with that as well. So master numbers are a whole other ball game, but just to understand that is part of that. And then there's also 4 specific numbers in numerology that indicate karmic debt.
Mm.
And the only reason I bring that up is because you have one of those in your chart as well. And I will say this, I wish that Pythagoras had a better marketing team
For what he called things, yeah.
when they called things,
Karmic debt
because
doesn't sound the
karmic debt
greatest.
doesn't sound like I really want to hear what you have to
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah. And yet, what I will say very, very honestly is I love these numbers because, first of all, it does not mean you're bad. It doesn't mean you're being punished. It doesn't mean you're going to live a crappy life. It really does mean that if it resonates with you, it can really point point in the direction of where there is karma that is being balanced specifically. And specifically, it opens a lot of doors of aha moments for people. And I can also tell you where the gift resides there and where the opportunities are more pronounced when these numbers show up. And so,
And for me, like hearing stuff like that, I did not have a pleasant inner experience as a kid. So like it has become clear to me through various means that like I had some things to resolve. Like I just could feel the way people perceived me, the way I had trouble expressing myself. Like, and there's many explanations. I studied psychology, so that there's many frames, but a larger frame of karma being one was useful to me and is useful to me, that there were some things I came in to balance the scales around.
and what I would say, what I will say, and I always say is we are all here. I can read any chart having to do with karmic implications because we're all here
Yeah.
karmically,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
the fact that someone has a karmic debt number or numbers in their chart actually gives them a head start, on being able to understand what it is they're balancing. And so in the context of your chart, it is
Yeah.
your soul urge number. And the soul urge number is a number that it is taken from your name, and it's taken from the vowels in your name. A, E, I, O, U, sometimes Y, sometimes W. The soul urge, is a bit of a quandary in terms of how numerologists consider the Y being used and all of that. Luckily, we just don't have to deal with that with your name because
Yeah.
there's no Y in it. So
There you
thank
go.
you, Daniel, for
You
making
got
my
it.
job so much easier right
You
now.
got it.
Um, and yet it is the vowels in the name. And it really indicates, it's also called the heart's desire. So it indicates really what you want and need down deep in
Mm,
your soul. And I find that it is also the number that indicates your soul's level of the most expansive growth in
mm,
life. And yours having the karmic debt. And I'll backtrack for 1 second and put this into context in terms of what those karmic debt numbers actually are. And they are a number 13. So 13, and then you put a slash there and a 4 so that you know it's a 13-4. So the foundational energy is the
yes.
4,
Uh-huh.
but the 13, the teen number is the indicator of the karmic debt.
Got it.
Okay. So 13-4, 14-5, and that is what your soul urge is, a 14-5. The other two are 16-7 and 19-1. So if you're out there listening and you don't know even what your numbers are yet, if you're born on any of those days, it's a
That's
part
going
of
to
your chart.
indicate a karmic debt as
Yep.
well.
Exactly, exactly. And so the way that I like to describe these basically is that the 5 itself is the freedom, is all about the freedom.
Well, and I often say in alignment with sort of the guidance system that flows through me, though in retrospect it was always this way. I just couldn't it came more from a wounded place, is that freedom is my highest value.
There you go. And that is your soul. That is down deep. That is the soul value. And so then how does this, then how can we understand it in terms of, okay, so now what?
Yeah.
Now that and so the 5 is a really interesting vibe. And the 5 is fun, um, fearless, adventurous, the escape artist, excessive. It's the number of addiction. It is the
Been
number
there?
of, right? And it's that everyone with a 5 does what they do excessively,
Yeah, that's fair.
right? So in it, and the 5 also is kind of what I would say is the ADHD number.
Oh, that's definitely
Usually
fair.
Usually people, and I say this lovingly, it's
Yeah,
like,
me too.
but the beautiful thing is it's like when people have this, they say, "Oh my gosh, that is me. I've been diagnosed with ADHD or dyslexia or
Totally.
anything else." And it's an energy.
Yeah, and I think, we sometimes carry a lot of fear around getting sort of good or bad readings, but I think the more expanded way is to just look for resonance, to understand yourself and understand how to work with it and to see that it's not ultimately a game about polarity. It's not like some here are good and some here are bad. It's more about you got a unique vibe going on and the more you learn about it, the more you can work with it. I sometimes I look from, when I look at my life from how I worked with sort of the victim side or the shadow side of it, and I got diagnosed with everything under the sun as a kid, and then how I've come to embrace what I consider to be the gifts and the light in that, because there's always going to be a shadow and a light side to any understanding, I imagine.
Absolutely. And what I would say with the 5, and then we'll talk about the karma that goes with that, but the 5 itself lives without a filter. So it's like, I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
And so it's all about learning. So if you're a 5, for instance, and you find out this information and it resonates with you, then what it points you toward is finding support, tools, information about how to focus yourself,
Mm,
how to rein yourself in,
yeah.
how to formulate healthy routines, how to do the things that will ground you. And so that on the one hand, I know a lot of 5s are like, this is just the way I am,
Yeah.
and then other 5s that, have shame around it or whatever. And so it's getting it out into the open and saying, no, this is actually your superpower.
Yeah.
Because the thing with 5s, it's about freedom through self-discipline, right? It's the constructive use of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
It's not freedom as in a little kid going, I'm going to do whatever I want, however I want. Yeah. And that's the impulse, because the 5 is incredibly impulsive,
Yeah.
right? And yet it becomes, it's gaining experience and maturity around that and going, okay, if freedom is my value, how do I create all the levels of freedom I want in my life?
Yeah. And, the way I interpret that is that rather than from the place of the wound, which says I need freedom from all these systems that are trying to impose on me, which I've held, it's how do I get free from the constrictions in my own body, of my own mind, that I seem to be victim to. I seem to be victim to the impulse. I seem to be victim to the excess. I seem to be victim to the feelings. How do I in a disciplined way work with those energies within me, not making it about other people, making it about how do I work with the energies within me to sort of um um embrace the freedom in that, in working with those
Exactly.
energies.
And what I would say about the 5 is the 5 at the end of the day is the biggest catalyst. So
Like the
the 5 is your,
transformer.
it's the 5 is the transformer. So when the 5 is in their game, they are all about progressive thought and action. They are all, nothing is back in the day. It's always what's next.
Yeah.
And it's always about asking, it's always the 5 is that catalytic person who always stimulates conversation, movement,
The
things.
fire.
And so they're the ones who ignite the fires and do all of that. So there is, so again, every one of these numbers encapsulates the richest, most incredible gifts that you have. And yet, because it's part of our character and what we're here to do, we're also going to have more oppositional forces in terms of us getting there. So what I love about, again, numerology is we can come up with those key themes, those key words that are going to continue to be the things that we are working with. So isn't that a blessing to be able to go, oh, this is a thing for me, and I need to work with this rather than against it.
It is, and and I'll say I'm grateful to be where I am in my life now, to be able to reflect and see, because I feel I'm able to work with the energy better. But what I can see is that in the past, I always, and this is kind of innate for children in general, though they may feel it differently. I always felt imposed on. I always felt my freedom constricted. I had a lot of issues with authority. I think that's an innate thing. But
That's very
I
much an 8 thing. We'll
yeah.
get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But so I always knew I had a lot of power, but it always felt so constricted. But it wasn't until after, sort of the latest system that I went through, which was sort of the doctorate in clinical psychology. And it wasn't until I realized, oh, I have to own my path. If I want to own the freedom, I can't keep trying to play out this resentment victim game with the systems I'm willingly choosing to be a part of. I have to step out in, and of course, that's where the fear lives. But that discipline and going through that sort of hero's journey, if we call it that, really has allowed me, the greatest freedom.
Absolutely. And then if we look at, I mean, we could talk about these numbers forever and a day, right? And yet, what I would reference here is that then if we look at the karma here,
Yeah,
so the karmic debt is 14. So the way that I dissect that is by looking at the number 1, which is the common denominator for all the karmic debt numbers. They're all teen numbers. And the 1 indicates selfishness in a past life, heightened levels, right? So look around us. I mean, we're all racking up the points, right? I mean, but for this in particular lifetime that you're bridging into, play this karma out. So, and then I look at what number is next to it. It gives me an indicator of what category this infraction took place. Okay. And it was in the number 4. Remember, you on one hand are a 44.
correct.
Okay. So you have karma there that's being tweaked. And the
Interesting.
karma, the 4, is all about hard work, responsibility, stability, tried and true goals, making things happen, showing up. So when this number shows up, it means that in many ways, I find it to be the most congruent of all the karmic debt numbers, because it's just really kind of giving you the ultra five, which is really asking you to be the poster child for the fearless, sensuous, adventurous, catalytic five, but focused
Oh,
and
with discipline.
with with discipline and with productive results,
Yeah,
right?
and it's so interesting because yeah, I don't love working hard. I don't. But what I've learned is that in order to get what I really want, which is freedom, then I can channel my energy toward, a discipline with an aligned goal that is innately motivating to me to care for myself, to heal my body, to serve, which and it's interesting because it's self-focused, but I love to serve. I love to serve people in the way that lights me up. So it has been this long journey of, rather than sort of giving power away to systems where I have to work for others, which I don't love. That kind of work does not resonate. But if it's work for me in the capacity to serve, I'm in.
Exactly. So again, what I find with people with karmic debt numbers is either they're riding in the same rut in the road, and they're usually not talking to me, if that's the case, really, because they're just not, or they're really working it, right? And a lot of people I work with who are, in their 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond can say, "Oh, woo, I was a wild one back in the day, but
Yeah.
I've really balanced that out." And so you can also get that pat on the back about, "Hey, good job. I could be dead, you know, I could be in rehab for the eighth time.
Yeah.
I could be, fill in the blank." And
Yep.
yet you can see, because the big bonus for the five, and here's where it's really interesting, is I find with the 14-5, often what these people are more than that kind of adventurous spirit. They're more, they kind of move more into the four energy, but they feel that longing to be the five. Right. So there's that internal mechanism that's a tension point,
Yeah.
and can be a little exasperating for them. So sometimes they have a lot of self-limiting behaviors. They're afraid of a lot of things. They kind of put themselves in boxes and then wish they could be out of them, And so, but it's just a little bit more nuanced, and a little bit more of, the step by step by step, as you get to pay down or balance, harmonize
Yeah,
the
yeah,
karmic
there's a kind
element.
of there's a learned or earned kind of patience and step-by-step discipline process to get what you're really here to get.
Exactly. Exactly. And I would think with both of these, because with the life path number 8, so if we move back over to your life path, which is an 8, and for those out there who don't even who are like, well, what is the 8? Well, the 8 is in numerology, it is the power number. It's about money, power, control, and authority. Those are the key words, key themes. Sounds all really fabulously
Yeah.
jazz hands, right?
Yeah.
Everyone out there's
Awesome.
like, yeah, baby, show me the money, ka-ching. And yet, to your point, I would say that eights, and it has been my experience, to be very honest, that other than the master numbers, the 8 is the biggest ass kicker.
Hmm.
It's just very intense.
Yeah.
And it's because it is meant that this lifetime you're meant to embrace and master um, this material world of planet Earth, right? And so, and we'll talk about how you have a very interesting discrepancy there. It's not a discrepancy, but it's a little bit of a push-pull, because your expression number, which is kind of like your rising sign in
Oh,
astrology, is a
interesting.
7.
Oh, okay.
So the 7 and the 8 have different agendas.
Yeah, like spiritual pursuit versus material pursuit.
Absolutely. And so someone might look at that and go, well, crap, I don't know what to do with that. I mean, how's anyone supposed to do that? Well, the beauty of it is that that is the optimal of both. They just need to feed off of each other and work together. So it's the seven allows the eight to infuse what the eight is on its brightest, shiniest, most ultimate, which is the spiritual warrior, mastering the spirit and becoming someone who has power, influence, and uses that for the betterment of, not only for yourself, and because one must use it for themselves as well, but to bridge that over into giving on a grander scale in that world of putting, of influence, power, bridging the movers and the shakers together to get stuff done, right, in a bigger, grander way. And the eight offers the seven some grounding, because the seven would go off and, retreat in their office and study and meditate and walk in the woods and,
I would
you
float
know,
away if I
do
could.
do all of that forever. And yet you can do both. You don't have to do just one thing. And yet it's the beauty of it is to understand where that tension point might come in internally for you, and then recognize that and make friends with it, right?
Yeah.
And go, ooh, yeah, I can be that and I can be that. And I can be soft with both of those, because the eight in its most mature has come to the point, and this is the eight is again about control and that dominance. You were talking earlier about the authority stuff and everything. Oh my gosh, eights have authority issues out the wazoodle. And also eights, if you're an eight out there listening, you also get authority people who are crappy authority of figures throughout your lives. Your parents, usually. Sorry to parents, but parents or bosses, teachers, all of those things and you bring people in, people show up in your life who, guess what? They want to control you. They want to dominate you. They want to, make you, they want to diminish you, because the eight is learning how to step up and step into their power and their sense of empowerment. And if they don't do that, there's no hope for them to get into the financial or anything else. So it is really early and often that the eight gets to be severely challenged with those things.
Yeah, and I would relate that back to my life again in that thing of going through the cycles of feeling victim to the systems I was a part of, like always, feeling the victimhood of being a child, and then educational systems never went very well for me, and then the ones I chose to be a part of, and always sort of feeling othered and never really, I had a stable financial family of origin that my soul chose to support me. But right when I had to start, I never sort of felt like I understood money because of this spiritual part of me that was like, I don't really relate to it. It doesn't like light me
Mhm.
up. But right when it was time to start sort of being an adult, as they say, it was always a struggle. I gravitated toward things that were never going to make me much money, that were actually more service oriented.
Yep.
But I was playing out that wound. I was playing out the resentment to the systems I was a part of, and just resenting the authority figures in my way until, in sort of my Saturn return, I would say, I realized, okay, to step up into what I feel are my gifts, I have to leave some systems. And, basically, I was like right at a point where I was going to have a full caseload, be a clinician, whatever. And I was like, yeah, so I chose no money and no foreseeable options to support myself, but it was in service of what you might call building something stone by stone, step by step. Like, okay, Saturn, okay, karma, like, let me start from the beginning in service of being this leader that I came here to be.
Exactly. And that goes back to your one birthday. Ones are really interesting. The eight and the one, I think I referenced earlier, are the most kind of business driven. And yet the eight is more about that CEO. more about the management, the organization, more about someone, walking into a system and then being the boss and making it
Yeah,
fly.
I can't
Now
work
the
for anyone. I
one,
just can't.
yeah, no, no. So, and then the one part of you is the entrepreneur, is the creative idea person, and the march to the beat. And that is from what you're describing about your journey, your past. It has a lot to do with the number one as well, because ones are very interesting. They want their independence, but they also want to be approved of 100% of the time along the way.
Yeah,
No, but I'm serious. It's like
yeah.
ones
It's
want
like the
they're
Leo. It
the
feels like the Leo.
it is. They're very, it's more Aries actually.
Oh, okay.
The
Oh, yeah.
one
Well, that makes sense. The first sign of
I
the
find the
zodiac.
one
Yeah.
is very Aries, and yet it's more about the one. And the beauty of the one is that they're working on self-confidence, not in a narcissistic
Like
way. Yeah,
healing the wound of like the small ego.
exactly. And they're learning about self with a capital S. So it's all the I words. It's I, it's initiation, independence, it's all of those things. So at the get-go, they have to extract themselves from feeling dependent or feeling as though they are being defined by others.
Yeah.
And yet they've got to go through the kind of kicking and screaming and rebellious, or at that point, one's acquiesce. And then they become the angry young
Yeah,
kids,
the people
the
pleasing, and then but it's so out of alignment with this kind of
exactly.
path that it's at a certain point. I mean, my body got sick is what happened, and it was like
Exactly.
you cannot play this game any longer.
You
And
can't play
I'll,
this codependent role. Yeah.
right, and I'll draw a little comparison to astrology, which is that in my first house there is Saturn conjunct Uranus, which is like the planets representing the most discipline and the most freedom. So it's like, okay, there's your wound, your like self-identity wound, and you're gonna have to work with it through the desire for freedom and the need for discipline.
And the need for that kind of discipline. And yet the gorgeous nature of it is that it's not impossible at
Well,
all.
that's good.
It's well, it's extremely possible. And that's what I always really I'm one of those people who will be very direct about the issues related, but also very, very much about this is a brilliant combination when you can really
Learn how to work
perfect
with
it
it.
and understand it and learn how to work optimally with it. And it takes some, again, kicking and screaming
Yeah.
early on as we're attempting to figure it out, because that one birthday again is learning how to break free of those confines, but not just. I would say the one is kind of like, for instance, in high school, maybe 10% of people with ones are the people who are like the captain of the football team or the debate team or the cheerleader, squad or whatever. 90% of them are the goths.
Yeah, I was
They're the goth
super. I mean,
kids.
I was the hippie that was just smoking pot and like,
Exactly. They're
yeah,
the screw the man and
yeah,
screw
that was me.
authority and all that. But the fascination that I have with it, in terms of the one, is that while the goths, and I'm saying this lovingly, any of you who are goths or have kids, okay, I'm not being anti-goth at all. I'm just observing that the goth culture is a culture and a community who come together in rebellion.
Yes,
But as
rebellious.
they do that, as they're rebelling, they also are there's also very strict and strident rules
Mm, to be a
about
part of the club.
how
Yeah,
to be a part of the goth club. You've got to have the black nail polish. You've got to have the
yeah,
this. You've got to have the hair dye. You've got to, so there are rules, there are stipulations, and you also are also wanting to have the attention that goes
right.
with it.
Yeah, it's showy. Yeah,
So it's very showy and it's very pay attention to me. It's approve of me while I actually disapprove of
right.
you.
Approve of me while I rebel and stand on the outside.
So it's a very interesting mix
Yeah, that's funny.
that we get to observe and work with.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. While I was doing a different kind of hippie thing, it was like, um, yeah, I don't resonate with what's going on in the center, like in like the town square, but I also feel an importance, or even more self-importance about what I have going on, and and I had a way of drawing attention to me by getting in trouble. That was my way. It was not great attention,
Yeah.
but it was attention.
But it was some attention. And it's funny, I have a very dear friend of mine who's in her 60s now, and she's an 8, and she had all this stuff. But basically I asked her, because she went, I mean, talk about an 8. I mean,
The highs and the
she
lows.
Oh, I mean, she did it all. I mean, from the, abusive partners to
Yep.
dropping out of school to almost getting raped and murdered while she was hitchhiking
Wow.
to then, going back, all of the things that went with that, and constantly being in with bad bosses who wouldn't, move her ahead. And she finally came up with Buddhist meditation, so she started that. And then, years later, so now she is a person who does nonviolent communication and also mediation, and she represents um, indigenous cultures,
Wow.
and legally, and she works against the United States government.
Wow. Talk about using power and working with power.
See, that's what I'm saying. So if you look at all the things, she's got every strata of her goal, of her purpose and her pathway.
Yeah.
She's been able to integrate it, but
Yeah. It's a wild ride.
it was a cluster. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way to get there. And I asked, and she's sought after. She's an 8. She makes tons of money. She's a workaholic, and all that goes with that. And yet I asked her what she felt would have happened if she hadn't have come across meditation and this. And she said, if I really look at it, Felicia, all of my problems are self-imposed. And you could say that about everyone. All of our problems are self-imposed. And yet, and I say this again to reach out and go, the 8 wants dominion, wants to control, wants to prove.
Yeah.
There's a part of the 8 that wants to prove what your worthiness, wants to prove this, prove that, just prove,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I feel like when you get to the creme de la creme, that place in your 8-ness where you do not feel the impulse to have to prove yourself to anyone, especially to you, is when it starts to sing,
Yeah. And
right?
you're given a position of control and authority because you're ready for it. You're ready to use that.
Exactly. And people, Daniel, who you walk into a room and that they are large and in charge. You know that they are powerful and they're not the ones who are talking about it.
Yeah.
Right? They're
Right.
not right?
Yeah.
That it's like wealthy people. They're not the ones, slinging the Gucci bags and
Right.
everything else. They're
Flaunting.
they're the
Yeah.
ones who own the company.
Yeah. 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 Nothing left to prove.
And are wearing the same pair of blue jeans that they've had for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a matter of really understanding what money means to you and what you'll do for it and what you won't do for it.
Mm-hmm.
What values, right? That is all part of the 8 path.
Yeah, it's for me it's really been about, okay, what does integrity look like for me? And
Exactly.
and and that involves very directly the health of my body and what will really allow me to live a healthy life and serve in the way that I feel I'm here to do.
Exactly. And then what I would just say, I think that we'll wrap up in terms of the numerology of your chart, because I find that your pinnacle cycles are very, very interesting to me. And I love looking at pinnacle cycles. This is a cycle, these are cycles of time. The personal year that we referenced before is something that is year to year. It's something that's the more immediate energy. So the pinnacles are more extended periods of time. There are four chunks of time, or uh, four pinnacle cycles that we all go through. We
Kind
go
of like
through them at different.
transits.
Yeah, they are, and they're longer. The first one and the fourth one, depending on how long we live, are the longest, and then the second and the third, in the middle, those quote unquote productive years, right, of our life, are 9 year cycles, and they usually coincide with our personal year cycle changes as
Okay.
well. And yet, for you, you have, I mean, if I were to, I'll just tell you the timing for it. So just for you, you could go, oh, I mean, sometimes we remember what was going on. And for you, you only have one of those so far, but you've got another one coming. So your first pinnacle was from birth to the age of 28. That was a
And so
change,
that
game
so
changer.
again, just to compare it to astrology, like that's coincides with the first Saturn return. Is that like
It
how
does.
do you calculate the pinnacle for numerology?
We use your birth date, and it's just a little bit more mind bending to
It's
do,
kind of
especially
nuanced. Okay,
verbally
yeah.
on there. It's a little bit more
So for
nuanced.
me, it's 0 to 28, but it's not that way for everybody.
Not that way for everyone. It is, yeah, let's just leave it at that. So it's not that way for everyone. But so 0 to 28, then 28 to 37. And so you're still in your second pinnacle, but you're heading toward the end of this one. 37 to 46, and then 46 onward. So I always say there's no crystal ball, right, in any of this, but there is a trajectory. And I find that it's really kind of lovely sometimes to know what your GPS is being set at, you
Yeah.
know? And it's bringing you down these pathways, and there are a million different ways to activate it and to be it, but that's the basic direction you're going. For you, and it's rare that I see this, your first 46 years are the same pinnacle number.
Wow.
So you don't have, so it's like, that's why I say that that the 9 is a very significant number for you, because it is a number 9.
Mm.
And the 9 in numerology is a very sacred number. It is the number of compassion, empathy, of letting go, of surrender. And you kind of have to get a little loopy lofty, when you start talking about the 9.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really, and yet it contains all of the energies, all of the positives, and all of the challenges of all the other numbers.
Yeah, like
So
the
it's a very,
end of the cycle in a way.
exactly. And so what I find, and when this shows up as your environment, and as a place that you find yourself, and you don't have 9s in your chart.
Right.
So I always look to see if you have this aspect in your chart, if it's something you're familiar with, it's kind of pulling that to the front of the line to be developed and experienced. Well, for you, it doesn't show up in your core numbers. So what does that mean? How do we interpret that? To me, the way I interpret it, it's almost like you show up in a foreign country.
Like my soul chose to play out this
To place
environment.
yourself
Yeah.
in this different kind of weird environment. It can be fun. I mean, we all know how it is to be an exchange. I mean, it's like you're an exchange student, right?
Yeah.
And you
But like you
go,
don't
and
understand the language.
but you don't understand the language or the customs, and the food gives you
Yeah.
indigestion and
Yeah.
all that stuff, but you have to learn to adapt, right? And so there's that aspect to it. And then what I would say is the 9, it's a time where you're really coming to terms with who you are on a soul level. And it's through losses. And it's not losses that other people don't have. It's just when those losses come, it's teaching you truly, madly, and deeply to really understand the temporal nature of everything, the
Someone else had
impermanence.
said to me, and I've heard it before and it resonates, that I build things up to tear them down. That like it's just like a lot of
And
that.
I use the mandala kind of reference to that. It's like when you're in these periods of time, it's like you're the monk with doing the Zen
Yeah.
mandala, and you're chanting, and you've got all this stuff, and then you do the ritual and you blow it
And you erase
away.
it. Yeah.
But the beauty of it is, and I know I'm getting a little, yeah, I don't know, lofty, and yet
Well,
truly
that's
this is the,
resonates.
yeah, that's how we
That's
are.
who I am.
Uh, is the beauty of it is that it's never gone though. it may the and that is the imprint, the
The
energetic
essence of what we're
imprint,
working with
the
here.
is always there.
Energy
And
cannot be
that
created or
is
destroyed.
exactly. So that to me is the ultimate power and lesson and beauty and joy of the nine. It's also on a very practical level when you can feel you have multi gifts, multi talents that you're attempting to move into place. And I would think with your five, you've got that as well as part of your chart. But it's also where we're often called to service and to do something that calls to your heart and soul. It is also a pinnacle that is known to draw you into international affairs or something, because the nine is about getting outside of your own backyard,
Mm.
right? About humanity and about drawing what brings humanity together, right? What are our commonalities? And it brings you into that. It's often where you might be drawn to the arts in some way, whether as a practitioner or whether as a benefactor or someone who just enjoys it, a lot in that way. And then again, no crystal ball, but at 46, you move into a number 7
What's
for
another
the
spiritual
rest
number?
for the rest of life.
Wow.
And yet very different, because the 9 to me is very, if we think about the energy of the 9, I like to put a few well-known nines kind of in a little blender, right? Or a petri dish or something to get the energy of it. And so let's throw Mother Teresa, Gandhi,
Cool.
Yogananda
Good company.
into on there, no
Yeah,
pressure
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
anything.
Cool, cool.
And then we've got the creatives. So we've got Adele, Prince, David Byrne of the Talking
Yeah,
Heads,
love it.
Anthony Hopkins, Jim Carrey. We've got these really outlandish, did I say Elvis Presley? He was
No, yeah.
he was also Elvis Presley was, and he loved numerology as well. He
Oh,
was really
wow.
into numerology, Elvis was. So what I'm saying is that it's this quirky, weirdo, charismatic
That
energy
checks out.
that carries you forward. And it's more whirling dervish, where the 7 is spiritual, but it's more contemplative. It's
Like more
slower,
more
it's more
retreats, more
gradual.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. The 9 is more out there, and the 7 is more, the 7 can still be out, doing their thing, but the 7 is much more of they got more of the hermit energy,
Yeah.
where the
Well, and it's interesting in it. I don't know if you are interested in human design at all, but it's very
yes.
much relates. I'm a 6'2" profile, and the
Oh
6
yeah.
has that very long, like three
Yep.
stage life that then after 50, you kind of come off the roof and the 2 is kind of the hermit energy. So it's interesting.
Yep. And what I love about all of this is that I will guarantee you, anybody, if you get both of your numerology and your astrology done, it just collates and collides really beautifully.
Yeah.
And I always not joke, say that once you know both your numerology and your astrology, you're out of excuses.
Right. Yeah. Now you just have to experience.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But yeah, very interesting, again, pathway environments that you find yourself in. And it's that 9 is what you're in, is your environment for these first 46 years. The beauty of that, though, in terms of a lot of people have different numbers for each, different vibes for each section of time. And a lot of times that because of that, and because sometimes it's a really different energy, it can be a really dramatic shift, right? That they're like, and so with you, you're just up leveling, up, not just, but you're up leveling, up
Just
leveling.
honestly
So
feels like I'm here to make a mess until like 46, and then it's like, all
there
right,
we
I
go.
think I'm
I
ready.
love it. I love it. Just to be in the sandbox, making,
Yeah. Yeah. And then after 46, it's like, all right, it's my mandala has been
yeah,
created.
it's been created, so it's good. But again, when it resonates with us and it's something we can just kind of go back and reference when we want to, and dig a little deeper.
And so
And
just to clarify, what then is changing from 37 to 4? What is changing there within the 9?
Uh, for you at 37 to 46, you simply have another 9.
Oh, interesting. Oh, so
Yeah.
it's like
So
another
it's,
cycle, but it's the same number.
yes, you have your first 3 pinnacles are all 9s.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, yeah. And most often people will have 4 different numbers, but not always.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Well, this really was deeper than I've ever gone with numerology, and it was very cool. I'll have to have a lot to chew on and to sit with, and hopefully resonates with the listeners as well. Yeah. So I'll just open up the space, Felicia, if there's anything else you'd like to comment on before we start to wrap up here.
I don't think so, really. I just feel like I just love this tool, and I think it just is, the numbers, like I said, they just don't lie, and I'm just infinitely fascinated. I will read someone's chart, and I'm like, I just can't make this up, when they corroborate things.
Well, what one additional thing I'll ask is maybe just a little comment on our current year, which I know is an 8, which is also my personal year, almost like the
Yes.
8 return, if you will.
Yep.
So maybe you could just say a little bit about the year we're in.
Yes. So like I talked about the personal years briefly, just the personal year cycle, which each of us derive through our birth date. Now, the collective has something called the universal year number, and very easy math. We just take the years. So it's 2024, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 4, that equals 8. So we're in an 8 universal year. This is collectively, I always look at this is the collective energy that we are all globally experiencing. And so I always look more toward what's going on politically,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, right? And that sort of thing. And how does that resonate with the universal number? So the universal number is an 8 in the cycle. I consider this the beginning of a very significant 3-year transition cycle.
Mm.
So 8, 9, and 1. So universally in the collective, those of you who are energetically curious and all the things that go with that, uh, realize that we are in this very changing period of time. Let's just put it that way. Astrologically, we talk about it, and other
Yeah, I receive a lot of intuitive
communities.
information about this period of time leading up to 2027.
Exactly. So new earth, that sort of thing, lots of very dramatic shifts happening. And even if we look at just the basic astronomy
Mm-hmm.
going on right now. We've
Yeah.
got solar
Solar flare
flares that are
activity, huge.
solar flares that are
Yeah.
going on,
Yeah.
off the charts right now.
Right.
We've had eclipses, we've had major,
Yeah.
and for anyone to think that that doesn't affect us, what are we, 70% water,
Right. Yeah,
as
that's
humans?
that's
And
just like physics. Yeah.
it's exactly, that's just raw science.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just put that on the table. So anyway, to get back to this changing cycle, the 8 is a year that is really about power. And it's also about our financial markets and how we are, our global, how we are globally dealing with finances, with money, with wealth, with poverty, with all those things. I think we're seeing that very, very much. I don't know where you live, but I mean, even where I'm living, there's so many more people who are homeless,
Yeah.
so many more, things like that are going on. So we're really reaching this crescendo of something's got to give, right? Something's got to happen here. And we're also dealing with wars. We're also dealing with court cases. We're also dealing with all kinds of things and the 8 has to do with legal issues.
Right.
It
Law and
has to
order, I
do
was
with
gonna
real
say. Yeah.
estate,
Mm-hmm.
law and order, all of the things that go with that. So basically, this is a power year, and it's where we feel the intensity around it, and it's meant for us all collectively, and then it kind of drips down into us individually. How do we disempower ourselves? So it's bringing those issues, those things up to the, in your face, up in your grill,
Yeah. Yeah.
is
The, the,
it,
the,
and
the, the
it's
wound of victimization.
exactly all of that is going to come up for us globally and then personally. And so if you're noticing that this stuff that is your weak, I always say it, define it as what is your weakest link
Mm.
in your life, right? In your
Your core
mindset, in your
wound.
world. And that is going to come up and it is going to keep barking at you until you, right?
And that's the
Until you
8.
really, and that's the eight. And that's the eight. And then next year is a collective, purge,
Yeah.
the end of a cycle. And then the year after is the beginning of a new 9-year collective universal cycle. So the 8 energy is very, it's a lot. It's just very intense this year.
Yeah. And it's just, again, I love things that sources of wisdom that overlap. It's something that really lights me up. And, whether it's astrology, whether it's human design, or really just what is my own highest authority, which is my own intuitive guidance, 2024, 2025, as if like things are, the energy's intensifying. 2026, I see as sort of a glimpse of something new. I would call it the light, depending on what perspective you're playing out, but and
Yeah,
then and ushering us into something new. So it's just really cool, not always pleasant, but can provide a context, a sense of meaning around where things are going and how they're unfolding, both personally and collectively.
exactly. Exactly.
Well, this has been awesome, Felicia. I'm really grateful to have you on and to go a bit deeper and to learn a bit more about myself, which is honestly
Absolutely.
why
It's
I
a
do most
pleasure.
things.
Yeah, absolutely a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, and so I'll just ask if there's anything else you'd like to say about where people can find you if you'd like them to, and anything you got going on.
Yeah, and just my website is kind of numerology central. So if you just want all things numerology, it is FeliciaBender.com. And you can get reports there. You can get a session with me. I do some events and that sort of thing. There are online courses and there's all kinds of free stuff. You can have a free videos and a calculator for your life path and a monthly forecast. So just you can go crazy. You can go hog
You can
wild.
dive in. You can dive
Anything
in.
you could just dive in if you're numerology curious.
Amazing. And I will certainly link that in the show notes as well for people. Well, thank you so much again, Felicia, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening. If you liked the episode and would like to support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review anywhere you listen. And if you'd like to connect further, feel free to reach out on Instagram, my website, or my Patreon page at patreon.com/Dr. Daniel Atkins, where for $5 a month, you can gain access to all sorts of exclusive benefits and offerings for the Be the Vessel community. This includes live channeled events, a new healing series podcast, and more. Until then, may you be the light, the frequency, and the vessel for your highest vision.